A couple years ago, I was working on a project. We were 5 rounds into editing, and we got notes back from the client basically asking us to redo the edit from scratch. If you're already 5 rounds into an edit, that seems absolutely ridiculous that you'd be starting over from scratch at this point, especially when there's only a couple days before the project's due. But that's where we're at. Evan, the composer, and I ended up pulling a couple all-nighters just to finish the project on time and have the client be stoked on the final output. All of this could have been avoided if we just had better communication from the get-go and set proper expectations up front so there wasn't any surprises later on. Through the years, I've had plenty of other experiences and talked to other creatives that have had very similar experiences where they either have a dissatisfied customer or they end up having to put in a lot of extra hours for free just to get a project done and have the client be happy at the end of it. I've slowly built systems to help address and smooth out any of these miscommunications before they happen. This starts right away from the initial call about a project and the proposal. Understanding what the project goals are, what are the success metrics, what is the budget range for this project, who is responsible for what, and what are the timelines going to be. So to make sure that we're in alignment on the goals of a project, in the proposal, I will have reiterated what the goal of the project is, either the timeline that we're going for or a story outline, visual references of the look we're going for. And for their budget, I like to break it down into having a few different options based on their goals. So depending on how involved they want to be or how much value they want me to provide, the budget will be adjusted accordingly. So this could either be different tiers or levels of a project. So some projects might have like a low, mid, and high tier, the lowest being the lowest involvement from me or less deliverables, and the highest being maybe a full production or just more expanded deliverables, expanded shoot days, basically adding more value to the project. So least value, cheapest would probably just be cam mopping and handing over footage, and most expensive being running the entire campaign from start to finish. The goal is to get as much clarity as possible between you and the client and remove as much vagueness or ambiguity as possible. This really comes to fruition in the contract. This is where we have payment structures outlined. What I typically do is 50% deposit up front, which holds the dates and helps fund the project, and then 50% upon delivery. To avoid the headaches of endless rounds of revisions, I have in the base contract 3 rounds of revisions and what each of those rounds of revisions looks like, what constitutes as a revision. I also recommend that there's a client representative on set to approve takes and just make sure that we're in alignment with their vision for the final product. They can have a reference monitor and really just be giving the okay to make sure everything is going smoothly and along with their vision. And the last thing is really having a clear statement of work, clearly outlining what they're getting for what they're paying and what the deliverables for this project are. The next system I've created to help manage client expectations is creating a master timeline and project dashboard. The master timeline has all the steps relating to a project from pre-production through rounds of editing and final delivery, so we know exactly where we are in the process at any given time. And the project dashboard is a great place to house all of the information related to a project, from contracts, model releases, storyboards, review links, everything in one place so there's no ambiguity or trying to search for stuff, getting lost in emails and all over the place. I also record all of my Zoom meetings and have that in that project dashboard so we can review those later on, create action steps from there, make sure nothing's lost in the mix, especially when you're juggling multiple projects at once, or if the project is spanning over multiple months, that you're not forgetting something that you initially talked about early on. I create this in Notion, but I've used Milanote in the past, and there's also other things that are meant to manage projects like Asana that I've used when I was working with Crystal Mountain. Just whatever works for you and your workflow. Some more ways to front load information are give the client an idea of what the project's going to look like. You can give them a story outline. Sometimes I'll do this in a proposal. Sometimes I'll do this after we do pre-interviews for a documentary to build out the story before we get to the editing, before we actually get to shooting, so we can get approval on what that story outline is before we really start production. You can create storyboards, mood boards to give the client an idea of what the project's going to look like. Another thing that can help with this is creating assets that help explain the process. So I have a PDF that explains the editing process, what is expected for each round of editing. First round editing typically being large structural changes, and each subsequent round being more and more refined, with the final round being very minor things like tweaking titles, colors, or sounds. Or creating Loom videos that are video walkthroughs of different processes or what is expected of them at different times. Just because I have these processes doesn't mean that I use them on every single project. The scale of the project determines how much is actually going to be implemented. If it's a shoot where I'm just shooting, being a DP camera op, I'm only really going to be using this to figure out what the goals are, what the look they're going for is, and basically what my role is in that project. If it is a production where I am running the entire production from concepting through final delivery, I'm probably going to be implementing all of these steps plus some more, just to make sure there's no miscommunication, there's nothing that's too vague, and there's really clear alignment on what the goals are, what the vision is, and just making sure that we're on the same page from day one through final delivery of the project. Hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, peace.